Bonjour et bienvenue dans cette vidéo. C'est Evan du site réussirlegmat.com. Et aujourd'hui, on va résoudre un problème de sentence correction du livre officiel de GMAT.
Okay, so let's get started. The themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry is universal, encompassing much of the human condition, while occasionally she deals with racial issues. So, if you haven't found a mistake in this stimulus, then we gotta start looking for ways to attack it. One thing that you should know in the GMAT is that when you see an underlined section that begins with a verb or equally ends with a verb, well then you should think about subject-verb agreement. Now we have two options here. They both begin. It both begins and ends with a verb. Let's start with the beginning. Let's start with is. So we have the themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry is universal. So what's the subject of is? What is universal? Well, we're talking about the themes, but there's an issue here. Themes is clearly plural, so it's not going to go with is. It should be are. The themes are. Sounds better, right? So for that reason, A is going to be wrong because A is always the same as what you get in the stimulus. So we'll move directly on to B, and we can see B makes the same mistake. So B is also wrong. So that leaves us with C, D, and E. So what's our next step? Well, we got to find a new mistake. We have a couple of options here. So we saw that this ends with a verb. So we could attack it from this way too. We could start looking at the verb. But there's also another way of doing it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scan up and down between C, D, and E and look for differences between them so that I can find a mistake. So a lot of people don't do that when they're not that familiar with the GMAT. A lot of people, their next step will be to read each one individually, C, D, and E, looking for mistakes in isolation. It's not really a very efficient technique, so it's much better to scan up and down like this. So let's scan each one of them, and what we'll see is that they're all the same up until this comma, and then they change here. And so we have two options. We have they encompass, so we have a pronoun they and encompass a verb, or what we can use is a participle, encompassing. So what's the difference here? Well, they encompass gives us a subject and a verb, whereas a participle gives us an adjective. And so how would we know which one is right, which one is wrong? So we need to think about sentence structure here. Let's go back and take a step back. We have at the start the themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry are universal. Now we have in that sentence a subject, themes, and a verb, are. When we have a subject and a verb in a group of words, we call that an independent clause. Okay? And the thing you need to know about an independent clause is it can stand alone, it can form a sentence. So here we could easily put a full stop after universal. So we could put a full stop here, and that could be a sentence. Instead, what we have is a comma. And then the thing is, what comes after in C is also an independent clause. So we have they encompass much of the human condition and occasionally deals with racial issues. That could be a sentence too. We have a subject, we have a verb, we actually have two verbs both relating to the same subject, they. So what do we have? We've got independent clause, comma, independent clause. That's a problem. That is not allowed. That's not grammatically correct. You cannot put two independent clauses together separated by a comma. It's what's called a run-on sentence, and it's a common mistake in sentence structure in the GMAT. So that's going to be incorrect. An alternative would have been to put a full stop, which would have made it correct. They could also put a semicolon, or if you're familiar with the fanboys, they could have used a fanboys. That's something we'll come across later. So we can easily get rid of C and E because they both make that mistake, of putting together two independent clauses. So C and E are wrong, which leaves us with D as our answer. Now, there are other mistakes here. So there's other ways that we could have solved this question. For example, deals is a plural verb. Sorry, it's a singular verb, excuse me, that goes with a plural subject, they. That would be incorrect too because of that. E has also another problem here with are dealing. Are dealing is something we call the present continuous. And what it is that it means right now at this very moment. And that's not the sense we want here. We're talking in general here about the themes of Rita Dove's poetry. So we don't want to give the impression of the poetry, the themes are doing this at this very moment. That would be incorrect. So that would be another way to get rid of E and C. The final thing we want to do is maybe do a sanity check. What that encompasses is just plugging back in the answer that we believe is correct into the original sentence and reading through to make sure it sounds okay. So let's do that. The themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry are universal, encompassing much of the human condition while occasionally dealing with racial issues. Sounds perfect. That's definitely our answer.
In order to help you go further in your preparation, I've created a video course on the GMAT sentence correction section for you. This course will teach you everything that you need to know in order to be a successful test taker in this section. So first we'll start off by looking at the basics of English to get you up to speed. We'll also include parts of speech there. Then we'll get into subject-verb agreement. We'll also look at common idioms and comparisons. After that, we'll do pronouns and modifiers, and we'll also look at common misplaced modifiers so that you can answer questions on modifiers easily. Finally, we'll look at tenses, conditionals, and word choices. We'll use all we've learned there to do 70 realistic GMAT style questions of varying difficulties. And I'll show you how a successful test taker solves questions step by step. I'm sure that if you work hard on this course, you'll see a dramatic increase in your GMAT score. To get access to the videos, I invite you to click on the link below, and I'll see you in a few minutes.